Ciao a tutti ragazzi, sono Erika e oggi riporto sul canale una rubrica che io avevo aperto 2 anni fa ma che poi non ho più continuato, shame on me, che come avrete potuto vedere dal titolo si chiama Leggendo in inglese. Per chi non fosse familiare con questa tipologia di video, avete ragione perché non la faccio da 2 anni. In che cosa consiste? Molto banalmente scelgo un libro in inglese e vi leggo il primo capitolo o parte del primo capitolo, se questo dovesse essere un po' troppo lungo. Questa mia rubrica nasce con l'intento di unire tante cose che mi piacciono e che io trovo estremamente utili. Dovete sapere che a me leggere ad alta voce in inglese affascina tantissimo, mi piace tantissimo il suono e mi dà anche la possibilità di immergermi ancora di più nella storia perché posso fare voci diverse, diciamo che è molto più particolare leggere un libro ad alta voce piuttosto che semplicemente nella propria testa. E questa non è solo una buona occasione per me per tenere allenata la lingua e migliorare la mia pronuncia, ma è anche una buona occasione per voi perché potete comunque approcciarvi un pochino di più alla lingua e vedere quanto effettivamente capite se qualcuno vi parla in suddetta lingua. Nell'episodio di oggi noi leggeremo insieme A Monster Calls di Patrick Ness. In italiano questo libro si chiama 7 minuti dopo la mezzanotte, ma nel caso qualcuno di voi volesse leggerlo in inglese io lo consiglio a chi ha un livello intermedio. Prima di iniziare vi ricordo che io vi ho linkato giù nell'info box il libro e anche la trascrizione del pezzo che andremo a leggere, quindi potete decidere voi come gestirvi questo video, potete semplicemente ascoltare oppure potete aprire l'info box e leggere mano a mano che leggo anche io. Ma ora basta cincischiare e iniziamo subito. The monster showed up just after midnight, as they do. Connor was awake when he came. He had a nightmare. Well, not a nightmare. The nightmare. The one I've been having a lot lately. The one with the darkness and the wind and the screaming. The one with the hands slipping from his grasp, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. The one that always ended with, "Go away," Connor whispered into the darkness of his bedroom, trying to push the nightmare back, not let it follow him into the world of waking. Go away now. He glanced over at the clock his mom had put on his bedside table. 12:07, 7 minutes past midnight, which was late for a school night, late for a Sunday certainly. He told no one about the nightmare. Not his mom, obviously, but no one else either. Not his dad in their fortnightly or so phone call, definitely not his grandmother, and no one at school. Absolutely not. What happened in the nightmare was something no one else ever needed to know. Connor blinked groggily at his room, then he frowned. There was something it was missing. He sat up in his bed, waking a bit more. The nightmare was slipping from him, but there was something he couldn't put his finger on, something different, something... He listened, straining against the silence, but all he could hear was the quiet hours around him, the occasional tick from the empty downstairs or a rustle of bedding from his mom's room next door. Nothing. And then something. Something he realized was the thing that had woken him. Someone was calling his name. Connor. He felt a rush of panic, its gust twisting. Had it followed him? Had it somehow stepped out of the nightmare and... Don't be stupid, he told himself. You're too old for monsters. And he was. He turned 13 just last month. Monsters were for babies. Monsters were for bedwetters. Monsters were for... Connor. There it was again. Connor swallowed. It had been an unusually warm October and his window was still open. Maybe the curtains shushing each other in the small breeze could have sounded like Connor. Alright, it wasn't the wind. It was definitely a voice, but not one he recognized. It wasn't his mother, that was for sure. It wasn't a woman's voice at all, and he wondered for a crazy moment if his dad had somehow made a surprise trip from America and arrived too late to phone and... Connor. No, not his dad. This voice had a quality to it, a monstrous quality, wild and untamed. Then he heard a heavy creak of wood outside, as if something gigantic was stepping across the timber floor. He didn't want to go and look, but at the same time, a part of him wanted to look more than anything. Wide awake now, he pushed back the covers, got out of bed, and went over to the window. In the pale off light of the moon, he could clearly see the church tower up on the small hill behind his house, the one with the train tracks curving beside it. two hard steel lines glowing dully in the night. The moon shone too, and the graveyard attached to the church, filled with tombstones you could hardly read anymore. Connor could also see the great yew tree that rose from the center of the graveyard, a tree so ancient it almost seemed to be made of the same stone as the church. He only knew it was a yew because his mother had told him, first when he was little to make sure he didn't eat the berries, which were poisonous, and again this past year when she started staring out of the kitchen window with a funny look on her face and saying, "That's a yew tree, you know." And then he heard his name again. Connor. Like it was been whispered in both his ears. "What?" Connor said, his heart thumping, suddenly impatient for whatever was going to happen. A cloud moved in front of the moon, covering the whole landscape in darkness, and a whoosh of wind rushed down the hill and into his room, billowing the curtains. He heard the creaking and cracking of wood again, groaning like a living thing, like the hungry stomach of the world growling for a meal. Then the cloud passed, and the moon shone again on the yew tree, which now stood firmly in the middle of his back garden. And here was the monster. As Connor watched, the uppermost branches of the tree gathered themselves into a great and terrible face, shimmering into a mouth and nose and even eyes, peering back at him. Other branches twisted around one another, always creaking, always groaning, until they formed two long arms and a second leg to set down beside the main trunk. The rest of the tree gathered itself into a spine and then a torso, the thin, needle-like leaves weaving together to make a green furry skin that moved and breathed as if there were muscles and lungs underneath. Already taller than Connor's window, the monster grew wider as it brought itself together, filling out to a powerful shape, one that looked somehow strong, somehow mighty. It stared at Connor the whole time, and he could hear the loud, windy breathing from its mouth. It sat its giant hands on either side of his window, lowering his head until its huge eyes filled the frame, holding Connor's with its glare. Connor's owls gave a little moan under his weight. And then the monster spoke. Bene, qua finisce il pezzo che avevo deciso di leggervi, questo fa parte del primo capitolo di A Monster Calls, non l'ho letto tutto perché altrimenti sarebbe venuto un video un po' troppo lungo. Fatemi sapere se questa rubrica vi piace, così posso continuare a fare video di questo tipo. Se avete anche delle richieste per quanto riguarda i libri, chiaramente io prediligerò i libri che ho in formato cartaceo in casa, però se riesco anche a recuperare, insomma, l'anteprima di Amazon di qualche libro che voi vorreste sentirmi leggere, per me va assolutamente bene. E niente, io vi saluto, spero davvero che vi sia piaciuto e ci vediamo alla prossima. Ciao!